This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidoyuat. It's Friday, May 31st. This is Africa 54. Sudanese youth take their political art to the streets. Long-time coffee farmers in Kenya eye a new path forward. And in our Music Makers segment, we'll hear the exciting sounds of Zimbabwean performer Mongoma. Vibrant street art manifests in many forms in Sudan's eastern city of Port Sudan. Many young people feel proud of their contributions to the recent protest movement that swept the country. Francesca Lina reports.
Port Sudan's streets after dark, alive with music, art and literature. Young people here feel proud of their contribution to the recent protest movement, which resulted in President Omar al-Bashir being overthrown in April.
The
Sudanese revolution has proven that this generation is a generation that loves the nation beyond measure. All of the youth's interests at this time revolve around building the nation, around the slogans that made the Sudanese revolution in all meaning, from freedom to justice and peace, and around figuring out how to turn those slogans into realities.
Murals like these and rap songs like these express messages of hope for the future of Sudan.
We rap because we are part of the global value system when it comes to issues of justice, equality and human rights. We try to deliver our message our own way, which is through rap.
Banks in the capital, Khartoum, were closed this week as opposition groups protested, pressuring the military into ceding power to a civilian administration.
Reuters' Francesca Lina with that report. Staying in Sudan, tens of thousands of demonstrators converged in central Khartoum on Thursday, demanding civilian rule amid increasing tensions with the country's military rulers who accused a protest encampment of threatening stability. The protest followed a two-day strike organized by demonstrators and opposition groups, frustrated by a deadlock in talks on a transition to democracy. The head of the Central Khartoum military region is accusing what he terms unruly elements of attacking a vehicle used by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Protesters claim the paramilitary support forces is trying to undermine a transition to democracy, a charge the force denies. Meanwhile, Sudanese security forces on Thursday delivered an order by the Transitional Military Council to close the offices of Qatar-based Al Jazeera television. The head of the Al Jazeera office says no reason was given for the action. In North Africa, thousands of Algerian protesters marched through the capital, Algiers, on Friday for the 15th consecutive week near the Grand Post Office, expressing anger at the postponement of the planned July 4th elections. The demonstrators are also demanding fundamental changes in the current caretaker government, which took over following the resignation of longtime leader Abdelaziz Bouteflika on April 2nd. Mass protests were also held in the cities of Oran, Tizi Ouzou and Bouira. Media reports say there is heightened security in Algiers and around the Grand Post Office. Protesters are also expressing fears of transport and internet interruptions. More political rallies are also being planned for the coming days and weeks. Bouteflika resigned following weeks of protests sparked by his intention to run for a fifth term. The body of a long-time Congolese opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi is back in his homeland 2 years after a political standoff ended. Tshisekedi's body was returned Thursday night from Belgium, fulfilling a promise his son Felix Tshisekedi made after unexpectedly coming to power as Democratic Republic of Congo's president earlier this year. Thousands of people gathered in the streets of Kinshasa to watch the procession of the coffin. Supporters say he was so potent, a threat to former President Joseph Kabila, that even his corpse had to remain abroad. Kenya is the 5th largest coffee producing country in Africa, but this may change. Coffee farmers in the East African nation are turning to other crops as coffee production is affected by drought and low prices on the international market. Mohamed Yusuf reports from Kiambu, Kenya.
Joseph Wainaina started farming coffee a year after Kenya gained independence. 55 years later, his farm is changing.
I continue cutting them down. I don't need it anymore. I want to finish with coffee.
Small-scale coffee farmers in Kenya have been uprooting their coffee trees, complaining of low prices and high cost of maintaining the seeds. Those who have a sentimental attachment to coffee and want to continue farming it must incorporate other crops to make a decent living.
I cannot live off coffee right now. I have to diversify and do other things, and that is how I went into mushroom farming and I went into pumpkin farming to try and diversify the source of income.
Ikonya says he's constantly battling diseases and maintaining his coffee farm has become expensive. The price of coffee in the global market has dropped up to 30 cents a kilo. If they are lucky, farmers get 70 cents per kilogram. A report by the U.S. Department of Agriculture predicts coffee production in Kenya will drop in 2019-2020 due to drought, low prices and farmers venturing into other crops. Joseph Kia of Kenya's Coffee Task Committee says they're trying to help farmers increase production and coffee tree yields.
We also proposed a 3-year subsidy program, and again with the intention of trying to assist the farmer to reduce the production cost.
The reforms in the coffee sector may have come too late for some farmers. Wainaina says the only thing that can convince him to continue producing coffee is an increase in global prices. Mohamed Yusuf for VOA News, Kiambu, Kenya.
Muslims in the U.S. state of Alaska faced nearly 20 hours of daylight during the fasting month of Ramadan. VOA's Yusuf Harande went to Alaska to see how some Muslims are adjusting to the long days.
This time of the year in Alaska, the sun shines nearly all day. During Ramadan, that is a challenge for Sadiku Muhammad's family.
Fasting in Alaska is amazing. The sun rises at about 4 o'clock a.m. and sets at around midnight. As such, we fast from 4 a.m. till 12 a.m. I have never fasted for more than 12 hours in my life.
Muhammad's mother, Hajia Serena, says Ramadan fasting is easier in Alaska than in the heat of West Africa.
The weather here is cool, so I can fast without even eating anything. I don't feel hungry at all. But in Ghana, due to the heat, you will be eager to break the fast. Since I have been fasting here, I have never worried about how long it is.
Some Muslims in Alaska observe fasting based on the daylight hours in Mecca to compensate for how much daylight can vary here so close to the Arctic Circle. Atu Chowdhury worships at the Islamic Center of Fairbanks.
And in summer, the days could be as long as 21 hours. In December, the days could be only as long as 3 hours. So we've been told by, not me, by our scholars, to follow a standard time zone, and mashallah, what we do, we stick to the time frame of Mecca, which is our holiest place. We do stay fast from 4 in the morning to almost 7 in the afternoon. We break fast and we do the routine things. We pray 5 times, just like any other people do.
Chaudhry's wife, Zakia, says Ramadan in Alaska is not so different from Ramadan in Bangladesh.
Whatever we do back home, we also do here. We eat sahur, we eat iftar, we fast the whole day, and we sometimes we spend time with the community that we also do back home. The only thing we miss here is that back home, a lot of Muslims around the neighborhood.
So, Muslims here says they do best they can. Hasib Ali moved to Alaska from Sudan.
We cannot match the way we do Ramadan home. One of these traditions is the joyness or the enjoyment of Ramadan during night times and not working during daytime. Here, there is no way you cannot go to work in the right time, the right place. However, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our intention of fasting according to Alaska's time, which we break the fast and the sun is still there.
In a state 3 times the size of Nigeria, Muslims in Alaska says they are fulfilling their traditions in the ways they honor their community and their faiths. Yusuf Aliyu Harande for VOA News, Fairbanks, Alaska.
France is spearheading a new higher education plan aimed to make it a more attractive destination for international students, but also a more expensive one. The move to raise tuition fees for foreign students is sparking protests, especially by African students who make up nearly half the country's international student body. Lisa Bryant reports that some universities are also pushing back against the tuition hike.
In many ways, this public university is the face of today's France and of France's reputation abroad. Nearly 10% of UPEC's student body is international. So it's no surprise its administration has been closely tracking the government's new higher education plan. Dubbed Welcome to France, the strategy aims to boost France's foreign student numbers from about 300,000 today to 500,000 by 2027. While supporting parts of the plan, UPEC opposes a sharp tuition hike next academic year.
A large part of our international student body comes from North and Sub-Saharan Africa. They can't afford a tuition increase.
The planned tuition increase has sparked protests, even though French fees are much lower than elsewhere in the West. Like a number of other French universities, UPEC has opted not to raise its fees. Even so, some here are worried.
I was pretty shocked to hear about the tuition hike, because it's about 15 times higher than what I pay now. It's not part of the budget we planned for when we left our countries.
African students aren't the only ones on a tight budget.
I definitely have the impression that the strategy, that part of the strategy of the French government will not contribute to the attraction as they want.
Vukovic adds Serbian students like herself may not be able to afford to study in France if tuition costs are raised. Home to the iconic Sorbonne University and prestigious business schools, France is the world's top non-Anglophone destination for foreign students and 4th overall. A big draw is also the country's inexpensive tuition. Still, France has been losing ground in recent years.
We are competitive. We are very competitive. The problem is we receive a lot of students, but maybe we don't receive them very well.
The government plan aims to tackle some of the hurdles by simplifying student visas, offering better housing and more French language classes. It also aims to expand France's educational presence in Africa. Experts say the country's higher education strategy serves larger goals by expanding French influence and interests abroad. Over the decades, presidents and business leaders, especially from France's former African colonies, earned university degrees here.
It's important to get the best students who tomorrow will be in charge of their countries.
France may also profit from potential barriers to studying elsewhere, including tougher immigration restrictions in the United States and uncertainty over Brexit. The government aims to increase scholarships to offset tuition hikes for the neediest students. But a recent study by Campus France, which represents French education globally, found a sharp drop so far in African enrollment since the plan was announced.
It's not very a problem for Chinese students or Indian students or American students to pay more. It's a problem for African students to pay more.
While aiming to attract more students from other parts of the world, UPEC wants to expand its presence in Africa. It's one way, UPEC's Thévenet says, to contribute to the continent's development. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Créteil, France.
We'll be right back.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to travel to Britain Monday on a state visit by the invitation of Queen Elizabeth. He will participate in events commemorating the 75th anniversary of D-Day. The White House says the trip will reaffirm the steadfast and special relationship between the two countries. But as White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports, the visit will not only be full of pomp, but also protests.
On June 3rd, President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump will meet Queen Elizabeth II on a state visit after meeting her during Trump's working visit to Britain last year. A state visit involves more pomp and pageantry, and the host country pays the costs. An invitation was extended after Trump took office, but was delayed due to a number of reasons, including security.
It was on again, off again, on again, off again. There is an enormous controversy surrounding a state visit for Donald Trump.
75 years after 150,000 Allied troops pushed German forces from France, Trump will commemorate the D-Day invasion in Portsmouth and in Normandy, France. The president will attend a state banquet at Buckingham Palace and a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Theresa May, who is resigning 2 days after Trump leaves over failure to reach a deal on Britain's exit from the European Union.
I would expect him to speak quite highly of May in his public appearances with her and wish her all the best. But I don't think that there's much depth to the relationship. I don't think the two of them see eye to eye or have a particularly strong personal bond.
Days before his departure, Trump said he may meet with Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, pro-Brexit politicians seeking to replace May.
It's not my business to support people, but I have a lot of respect for both of those men.
Trump and May could still discuss major issues related to current U.S.-UK relationship, including negotiations on a trade deal and how to deal with Iran and China.
The question of Huawei in particular, but Chinese investment more broadly, where the U.S. has taken a much more hardline approach than the U.K. And the question of confronting Iran, which the U.S. under the Trump administration has much more appetite for than either the U.K. or France.
Last year, more than 100,000 people protested in London and elsewhere in Britain. This year, organizers say they expect similar numbers, protesting against Trump's policies, including immigration and climate change. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. It's lunchtime at the Panaf Culinary Institute in Ivory Coast's business capital, Abidjan. And Chef Loic Dabla is instructing his students on how to create the day's menu. Panaf is a pan-African culinary center that is both a learning space for aspiring chefs as well as a restaurant. Dabla says he wanted a place where he could teach the history of African food and serve a variety of healthy African dishes with a modern twist. The center hosts monthly themes based on different African festivals that celebrate food and culture. Dabla has also created a foundation that trains youth and women with cooking skills in order to fight unemployment. Next up, 1-year-old Fatma is arriving in Israel for heart surgery. She's one of 15 children who were checked by Save a Child's Heart medical mission in Zanzibar and put on a plane for an operation to fix a congenital heart defect. 20 years ago, the very same charity repaired Fatma's mother's heart too. Fatma is the 5,000th child saved by the organization. And finally, hundreds of houses are crammed into this hillside Rio favela. But at its heart lies a hidden oasis of greenery, birds and monkeys. This area, called the City Park, is held up internationally as an example of urban renewal. It used to be a garbage dump, but over a decade, local resident Mauro Quintanilla cleared 16 tons of garbage and used recycled trash to build his park. Today, an old drug trafficker's escape route is a viewpoint onto the city's iconic beaches. And that's what's trending today.
Crowds of nearly 30,000 people in Swaziland have attended the Bushfire Festival in Eswatini, which celebrates music, food, design and cultural diversity. Serena Chondri has more of the event details.
Welcome to one of Africa's biggest music festivals in tiny Eswatini. Formerly known as Swaziland, the Bushfire Festival is held here annually in the Valley of Heaven in the country's northwest. 30,000 people from all over the world are here to celebrate.
One of the most interesting things for me is the possibility of meeting people from the Southern Africa region. As a Mozambican, and in Eswatini, meeting people from South Africa, from Botswana, from Lesotho, from everywhere in Africa. That's a great platform.
The weather, the people, the vibes, and of course the music is amazing.
Hailed for being pollution and crime-free, this year's festival brought together artists from 25 different countries, including Morena Leraba from Lesotho and the German techno marching band Moita. Organizers say the attendees were from over 60 countries.
That was Serena Chondri of Reuters reporting. And it's Music Makers Friday, and joining us now is Africa 54 Music Makers host Heather Maxwell. Heather, I'm excited to hear about today's featured music artist.
Thanks, Esther. Good evening and happy Friday. There are thousands of great artists across Africa whose music doesn't reach audiences beyond the regional level, and for no good reason. Well, on Music Time in Africa, I like to suss them out. Meet Mangoma. Kwame Ofori joined me in the studio to present. All right. Hello, everybody. Hey, Kwame.
Hey, Heather. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Nice one.
This week, we're featuring a song called Busheshe, and it is by an artist from Harare, Zimbabwe. His name is Othniel Mongoma Moyo, and he just goes by Mongoma. Now, I gotta say a little bit about him before we start listening to this song, because I met him in Harare last year in 2018 in February. Do you remember when I went there?
When you abandoned me here, but that's fine. That's another conversation for another day.
Yes, when I abandoned you, I met him and went to his house in what they call a ghetto neighborhood, which was actually a very nice neighborhood. I loved it. Mongoma is a wonderful artist. He's a very gentle spirit, but extremely multi-talented and gifted. So we sat outside and filmed and interviewed him. He played the mbira, which is, as you know, Zimbabwe's traditional instrument. And then he put that aside and he started playing percussion really well. So he's, he's multi-talented, and he writes his own songs and composes his own music. So he just contacted me last week and said, I've got a new song called Busheshe with a music video. I watched it, listened to the song. Both are wonderful. So here it is.
I did. You sent it to me a couple of days ago, and I must say I did enjoy it. It's exciting. When you listen to it, you want to just bounce. So yes, definitely let's get into Busheshe.
Yeah.
Type
And then the drumming stood out for me. And this is supposed to be his first recording?
I believe so. I think he had an album, but it was more acoustic. There's a moment when he breaks out in a percussion solo. But this guitar solo right here, I love. Listen.
Hey. Oh. Okay.
It sounds manding to me.
Yeah. Is that the lead guitar? Or just...
Yes. Listen.
And then the drumming. Now, another thing I must commend him for is, for me, with any song, once I hear horns, I'm sold. It could be the trumpet, the saxophone. Once there are horns,
you're done.
I am done. And he used it in a way that just adds to the composition of the song. We need to be back up that. That's what yo, what to do? Get us.
Music Makers Friday. For more Music Time in Africa, be sure to listen to my one-hour radio program, Saturdays and Sundays on FM and shortwave, or listen online anytime at voanews.com. Just search for Music Time in Africa. Back to you, Esther.
So refreshing. I enjoyed it so much. All right, Heather, thank you so much. And join Heather Maxwell again next Friday for another edition of Music Makers segment on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Good night from Washington. Enjoy your weekend as well, Heather. Come with a busheshe thing here.